Hello there, you're watching Al24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next in our World News program. President Biden addresses the public on Tuesday after meeting with his COVID-19 task force. He announced that he will be doubling the purchase of Pfizer COVID pills as cases surge. Plus, Hong Kong has reported its first untraceable local coronavirus case in nearly 3 months, with officials warning it is likely to be an Omicron infection and may indicate silent transmission chains in the community. Also coming up in our news program, the U.S. Department of Justice charged the former Colombian military Mario Palacio of involvement in the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse last year. And Kazakhstan has lived protests in some major regions due to the sharp increase of fuel prices. The President Kasim Tokayev has called for an appeasement to the situation in the country. Thank you for joining us. President Biden addresses the public on Tuesday after meeting with his COVID-19 task force. He announced that he will be doubling the purchase of Pfizer COVID pills as cases surge in the country. Zahra Farjani reports.
American President Joe Biden on Tuesday sought to reassure the public that the federal government is prepared to address the growing COVID-19 health crisis amid an overwhelming increase in infections driven by the highly transmissible Omicron variant.
Omicron is very transmissible variant, but much different than anything we've seen before. But you can protect yourself. And you should protect yourself, quite frankly. Get vaccinated. Get boosted. There's plenty of booster shots. Wear a mask.
Addressing the country before a meeting with the White House COVID-19 response team, Biden once again urged Americans to get vaccinated and boosted to avoid the coronavirus infections.
You can still get COVID, but it's highly unlikely, very unlikely that you become seriously ill. And we're seeing COVID-19 cases among vaccinated in workplaces across America, including here at the White House. But if you're vaccinated and boosted, you are highly protected.
President Joe Biden has also pledged to keep schools open in the face of the fast-spreading Omicron variant.
That's why I believe schools should remain open. You know, they have what they need because of the American Rescue Plan. Well, the first month we were in office, or second month, that I signed in March, we provided the states with $130 billion, with a B, $billion to specifically keep our students safe and schools open.
The U.S. hit 1 million new COVID-19 cases on Monday, underscoring the threat of the Omicron variant as the third year of the pandemic gets underway.
The National Health Service in the United Kingdom will face significant pressure in the coming weeks from the nationwide spread of the Omicron variant. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced in a visit to a vaccination hub a day after United Lincolnshire Hospitals Trust declared a critical incident linked to extreme and unprecedented staff shortages. Nabil Khazini reports.
The pressure on National Health Service, NHS in England, is on as Omicron cases continue to surge. But for now, restrictions in England are unchanged.
Further restrictions, I think people have also responded very sensibly by being cautious, by accessing testing and by doing other sensible things to help to keep the virus at bay. And we will continue to monitor the data and keep it under review.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned that pressure on the NHS is going to be considerable for the next couple of weeks and maybe more.
I think we've got to recognise that the pressure on our NHS, on our hospitals, is going to be considerable in the course of the next couple of weeks and maybe more, because there's no question that Omicron continues to surge through the country.
1 in 15 people in England are affected with COVID, making a total of 1 million of the population to be isolated, an increase of 50% compared to the last 7 days. But unlike the previous waves, that's actually not the major cause for the pressure on the NHS. The cause is the staff shortages. doctors and nurses are off with COVID, and as a result, not all patients can be discharged.
Most worried about the level of staff absences that they are seeing. That is putting real pressure on particular trusts. But clearly, we're still waiting to see if there are going to be large numbers of older people who are seriously ill with this variant. And that's why we're preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best.
Schools across the UK are reopening this week. Children are back to school with masks on their faces and classes with open windows. The government aims to stop the spread of the virus at schools.
And goodness is very low risk to children. So I'm very wary. I will listen to what the government says, but I am very wary about imposing masks on children in schools because I worry about their well-being, their anxiety and their mental health, which has already suffered because of school closures during lockdown.
Education Minister says keeping classrooms open is a priority as COVID-19 caseload surges and fueled by Omicron. But children may face merged classes amid staff shortages.
India is seeing a surge in infections with tens of thousands of new cases. Over 120 deaths were reported in the last 24 hours, according to data from the country's health ministry. Chairman of the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization said the country is clearly in its third wave of COVID-19 and the whole wave seems to be driven by the new variant. Chinese authorities imposed a strict lockdown on the central city of Yuzhou Monday after finding 3 cases of COVID-19. According to multiple news reports, the second city placed under mass lockdown as the country aggressively pursues a zero-COVID policy ahead of the Winter Olympics. Yuzhou is the second Chinese city to be placed under strict lockdown as officials battle the country's worst outbreak of COVID-19 since early 2020. Hong Kong has reported its first untraceable local coronavirus case in nearly 3 months, with officials warning it is likely to be an Omicron infection and may indicate silent transmission chains in the community. Health authorities have not found the case to be a close contact of known positive case, nor has he any recent travel history. Thousands of passengers were detained on a cruise ship in Hong Kong on Wednesday for coronavirus testing after health officials linked 9 passengers to a recent Omicron cluster and ordered the ship to return. After 9 passengers were identified as close contacts of an infected patient linked to a new Omicron cluster, the ship was ordered to return. And now for more news about COVID-19 around the world, let's follow this report by Sid Islam.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved the use of a booster jab of the Pfizer and BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 12 to 15 years old, and lessened the interval for booster shot to 5 months. The decision came as COVID-19 cases increased and as many workers and school children returned from holiday vacations in order to protect people from the rapidly spreading virus. Thousands of schools delayed this week's scheduled return to classrooms following the holiday break or switched to remote learning as the Omicron variant of the coronavirus pushed COVID-19 cases to record levels. In other school districts, officials pressed on with plans to reopen, including in hard-hit New York City, where one of over 3 COVID-19 tests over the last week was positive for the virus. As many as 66 of the over 2,000 people on board the Cordelia cruise ship, which came to the coastal state from Mumbai, have tested COVID positive according to State Health Minister. The cruise liner were carrying hordes of New Year revelers. A medical team came on board to conduct the RT-PCR tests of the passengers and crew members. Officials had instructed that no one should disembark from the ship before the result of the RT-PCR test was declared. At least 21 children were given an adult dose for the COVID-19 vaccine by mistake on Monday at a vaccination center at Hanover Zoo, according to health officials. Merlin Graff, medical specialist, said the large dosage will not harm children's health, but it may cause side effects such as a sore arm or fever. According to South African officials, COVID-19 may have reached its peak. The country's health agency reported 29.7% decrease in the number of new cases recorded in the week ending December 25, 2021, with 89,781 cases, compared to the previous week's number of new cases, which marked 127,753 infections.
The U.S. Department of Justice charged the former Colombian military Mario Palacios of involvement in the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse last year. Haitian president was killed in the early hours of July the 7th when a crew of armed gunmen stormed his home in the capital, Port-au-Prince. The South Korean military announced that the North Korea launched a missile into the sea in the first test conducted by Pyongyang in the new year. The Joint Chiefs of Staff in Seoul said in a statement that the missile was fired from the eastern coast of the peninsula toward the sea without giving any further details immediately. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock is traveling today to Washington to meet U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Baerbock said she would reaffirm the importance of dialogue with Russia to prevent conflict over Ukraine. The talks will cover the full spectrum of bilateral relations, including the situation on the Ukrainian border. And in Canada, the federal government has entered into 2 agreements in principle totaling $40 billion to compensate hundreds of thousands of Aboriginal children taken from their families by social services for decades. The agreement reached provides compensations for First Nation children who have been removed from their homes since 1991, as well as for their parents and caregivers. Nabil Khazini reports.
Canada announced details of an agreement in principle whereby the government will provide billions of dollars to reform the First Nations child welfare system and compensate Indigenous children who have been victimized. The deal is slated to end a human rights challenge that was launched 14 years ago.
No amount of compensation can make up for the traumas that First Nations children, families, and communities have experienced. But this will begin the process of healing, and it will support families on that journey of healing. It will support individuals who have experienced extraordinary loss and harm.
The agreement provides $20 billion in compensation for children who were removed from their homes between April 1991 and March 2022, as well as their parents. Another $20 billion will be used to improve the child protection system in Indigenous communities. This amount also includes funds for the support of young Aboriginal adults who have gone through the youth protection system. The agreement in principle means that the groundwork has been decided, but final details have not been made. The deal was reached on December 31st and is expected to be negotiated before the end of March.
What we need to do is see the government actually implement these measures to stop the ongoing discrimination. And also, really important, Todd, to make sure it never happens again to another generation of kids.
According to the Assembly of First Nations, the exact number of children who will be compensated is not yet known, but expectations estimated that more than 200,000 First Nations children were impacted by the program and would be eligible to receive funds. Canada's residential school system forcibly separated Indigenous children from their families in order to assimilate them into the dominant Canadian culture and to isolate them from the influence of their own Indigenous civilization.
And now, Indian police said on Tuesday they had made their first arrest in an investigation into an online app that shared pictures of scores of Muslim women for an auction in a case of apparent hatred toward the minority community. In recent days, several Indian Muslim women said on social media that their pictures had been used without consent to create an open source app in the GitHub platform. 19 people from China's Uyghur Muslim ethnic group filed a criminal complaint with a Turkish prosecutor on Tuesday against Chinese officials, accusing them of committing genocide, torture, rape, and crimes against humanity. Lawyer Gulden Samez said it was necessary because international bodies had not acted against Chinese authorities, who have been accused of facilitating forced labor by detaining around 1 million Uyghurs and other mainly Muslim minorities in camps since 2016. Kazakhstan has lifted protests in some major regions due to the sharp increase of fuel prices. The president, Kasim Tokayev, has called for an appeasement to the situation in the country and has dismissed his cabinet and declared state of emergency. Sid Islam reports.
After the mass anarchy and protests due to the rise of fuel prices, Kazakhstan's president Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has dismissed his cabinet and declared states of emergency in the country. Tokayev had accepted the resignation of the cabinet of PM Askar Mamin in order to re-establish price controls on liquefied petroleum gas and other socially important consumer goods. The decision came after clashes in Almaty city between protesters who called for the government resignation and the police. The latter used tear gas and grenades to prevent the protesters from breaking into the mayor's office. Some protesters shouted "old man out" to Tokayev's still powerful predecessor and mentor Nursultan Nazarbayev. Following the mass protests, Tokayev imposed states of emergency in Almaty and other western provinces. According to Tokayev, the curfew would last 2 weeks, which starts from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. local time, in addition to movement restrictions and mass gatherings ban.
Призывы атаковать служебные помещения гражданских и военных ведомств являются абсолютно незаконными. Это преступление, за которым может последовать наказание. Власть не падет, но нам нужен не конфликт, а взаимное доверие и диалог.
Some social media, including Messenger and WhatsApp, were unavailable in the country, while 2 other apps that reported on the protests seemed to have been blocked. According to media, the jump in fuel prices would have affected the price of food, which has witnessed sharp upsurges since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. In order to restore stability in the country, Tokayev had tweeted late Tuesday that authorities had taken decision to lower fuel prices. However, the announcement failed to weaken protests in some regions in the country.
And in an exercise simulating a war situation, Taiwanese Air Force planes blasted into the sky on Wednesday, demonstrating the country's battle readiness despite rising military tensions with China, which claims the island as its own. Before takeoff, flights crews of a facility in the southern city of Chiayi, home to the US-made F-16 fighter jets that are routinely dispatched to confront Chinese warplanes, rushed to get their planes ready. Peruvian prosecutors said they would investigate President Pedro Castillo when his term expires for alleged crimes of influence, collusion, and illegal sponsorship. Prosecutor Zoraida Rivera opened the investigation case with the president for allegedly committing crimes of abuse of power and collusion. And an American biotech billionaire is facing years behind bars after being found guilty of fraud and conspiracy charges. Elizabeth Holmes was seen the golden girl of Silicon Valley and her blood testing startup company, a revolution for healthcare, but it was all fake. Islam City reports.
The little tubes that we collect the...
After months-long landmark trial in California, blood testing company Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty of defrauding investors. She was found guilty on 4 offenses, including conspiracy to defraud investors and 3 counts of wire fraud.
Of access to their own health information.
According to prosecutors, Holmes allegedly lied about technology that could identify diseases with just a few drops of blood.
Said the jurors in this 15-week trial navigated a complex case amid a pandemic and scheduling obstacles. I thank the jurors for their thoughtful and determined service that ensured verdicts could be reached. The guilty verdicts in this case reflect Ms. Holmes' culpability in this large-scale investor fraud, and she must now face sentencing for her crimes.
She has disputed the charges, with each carrying a potential sentence of 20 years in jail. She was charged with 11 counts in total, but was found not guilty on 4 of them, including cheating the public. Holmes promised to revolutionize the healthcare industry, but claims began to crumble in 2015 after Wall Street Journal investigation revealed that its cord blood testing technology did not work. Jurors were asked to consider hundreds of documents and sit through evidence from dozens of witnesses. In her own defense during the trial, Holmes admitted that Theranos made mistakes, but insisted that she never intended to deceive patients or investors. Holmes was not taken into custody, but a sentencing date has yet to be set, with another hearing set for next week.
A Palestinian prisoner who has been on a hunger strike for 141 days to protest being imprisoned without charge has agreed to end his fast after reaching a deal with Zionist entity to be released next month. His lawyer said Hisham Abu Hawash, a 40-year-old father of 5, is the latest of several Palestinians to go on hunger strike to protest being held under administrative detention, a measure where a prisoner is held indefinitely without charge or trial. Harry Potter star Emma Watson expressed her support to the Palestinians in a new post on her official Instagram account, provoking extensive backing from pro-Palestine users and irritating in the same time Zionists. The film star shared a picture from a Palestinian post showing the phrase saying solidarity is a verb. And now Sudanese reinstated former Prime Minister resignation has put the country in a complex situation, as Sudan is already in a fragile state since the October 25th coup. Pro-democracy activists have launched wide demonstrations in the country, and security forces deployed numbers of troops in all regions. Usama Ayedi reports.
After the unexpected resignation of Sudanese Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, the country is ahead of a risky period. The resignation of the Sudanese civilian prime minister triggered pro-democracy groups and activists to revolt against the military interference in politics in the country. Military and security forces in Sudan are fully in control of the already fragile country, as many troops were deployed in different parts of the country ahead of the expected riots by pro-democracy activists. Streets leading to the army headquarters in central Khartoum were sealed off amid a heavy presence of riot police, parliamentary forces, and army personnel. Last Sunday, Hamdok announced that he was stepping down, saying that he tried to prevent the country from sliding towards disaster and that it was now at a dangerous crossroads, threatening its very survival.
The restoration of arrest and search authority to the intelligence service and the continuation of repression against the demonstrators were the straw that broke the camel's back in the Burhan-Hamdok agreement.
Pro-democracy activists have urged protesters to take to the streets and to head to Presidential Palace in Khartoum until victory is achieved. Sudan has been navigating a fragile transition toward full civilian rule since the April 2019 ouster of veteran President Omar al-Bashir, following an unprecedented wave of youth-led protests.
Mauritanians are planting trees to fight the approaching desert sands. The plantation project, called Great Green Wall, started in 2007 and is now adopted by more than a dozen countries in the African continent. Miriam Zian reports.
The Great Green Wall is an African-led movement with a great ambition to grow an 8,000-kilometer green wonder across all Africa. The wall progressed by 15% since 2007, according to the website Great Green Wall, and is now bringing life back to the million hectares lands degraded in Africa. And once finished, the project will be the largest of its genre on the planet. Desert sands are threatening homes and farming fields in Mauritania. To combat the approaching sands, Mauritanians are erecting a Great Green Wall in the hopes of slowing the process of the phenomenon. The initiative began in 2007, but one of the difficulties was drought.
Since 2018, rain has become very rare, and since then people have been using pumps in palm groves. It is through this method that we were able to protect them. People need to be helped with pumps during times of drought. With the help of these solar pumps, we were able to make water available to everyone and meet the water needs.
To address those difficulties, local farmers have devised a variety of ways and solutions. Salem explains that they are using a specific method to protect the palm groves from wind effects by surrounding the palm trees with a small hole and filling it with water. With not much time remaining, the authorities have turned to support community projects to protect agriculture and environment.
The program of Great Green Wall, what needs to be understood is that it isn't an integrated rural development program that combines both the objectives of preserving the environment and the objectives of setting up rural development poles, so as to be able to improve the living conditions of rural populations and especially the most vulnerable populations.
The Mauritanian Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development, Miriam Bekay, explains the aim of the project and its progress. The Great Green Wall project is currently being implemented in over 20 African nations.
And for more world news, let's follow this report by Zahra Farjani.
The U.S. Congress probe of the deadly January 6 assault on the Capitol by Donald Trump supporters soon begins weeks of public hearings that will put the investigation in the spotlight as campaigning intensifies for the November elections. Prince Andrew of Britain's lawyers on Tuesday will ask a United States judge to dismiss a lawsuit by a woman who has accused him of sexual assault 2 decades ago when she was 17. More than 125 Houthi rebels were killed in airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition and clashes with pro-government forces in Shabwa and Al Bayda provinces bordering Marib. Brazilian President Bolsonaro will not need surgery after being hospitalized for an intestinal blockage that has now been cleared. The blockage was Bolsonaro's latest complication from a 2018 stabbing. Investors in financial products issued by China Evergrande Group protested outside the cash-strapped company's office, with many worried that their returns would be sacrificed to keep real estate projects afloat.
And for more economic world news, let's follow this report by Nabil Khazini.
Oil prices ended on a positive note, having fluctuated for the first session of the year just before an OPEC Plus meeting. The price of a barrel of North Sea Brent for March delivery rose 1.54% to $78.98. A barrel of West Texas Intermediate WTI for February delivery rose 1.15% to $76.08. OPEC Plus, which has maintained its economic outlook, is just also counting on a lower impact of the Omicron variant on demand, considering it moderate and short-lived. The Swedish furniture giant IKEA has started to raise some of its prices in response to tensions in its supply chains. The company hiked the prices of its flat-pack furniture by as much as 50%. Desks, beds, and wardrobes sat among the items to see massive overnight price rises as the costs of shipping, raw materials, and energy soar. Inflation soared to 36.08% in Turkey in December, a record since September 2002.
We used to buy lots of things with 100 lira. Now you enter the market, choose 2 things and leave.
The rise in consumer prices, more than 7 times higher than the government's initial target, is explained by the fall of nearly 45% of the Turkish lira against the dollar in 1 year, despite emergency measures announced by the Turkish President Erdogan in mid-December. Tesla is once again surpassing the expectations of Wall Street analysts. For the last quarter of 2021, Tesla crosses the 300,000 deliveries of electric cars purchased from its customers, a staggering figure despite reviews and production problems. Parks lovers in the United States can enjoy visiting parks at no cost in 2022. The U.S. National Park Service has released its free entrance days for this year. Popular national parks like Glacier, Grand Canyon, and Grand Teton will welcome on Martin Luther King Jr. Day the first free entrance day. Many visitors who, despite the free entrance, should be ready to pay parking fees to avoid any surprises.
And to some tennis news now, the decision to exempt Novak Djokovic from COVID-19 immunization restrictions to compete in the Australian Open in Melbourne has been dubbed appalling, with some players surprised by the late decision. The defending Australian Open champion announced on Instagram on Tuesday night that he was travelling to Melbourne with exemption permission to compete in the tennis competition. All Australian Open participants must be fully vaccinated or ask for or receive a medical exemption. And finally, the Algerian Football Federation announced on Tuesday that Algeria will play in green against Ghana during their friendly preparation match for the 2021 CAN Cameroon African Nations Cup, scheduled for Wednesday at the Education City Stadium in Doha at 5 p.m. Algeria time.
After the first cancellation of the first friendly match planned against Gambia, Algeria of Belmadi will have to refine their plan of action for CAN 2021 during their preparation match against the Black Stars of Ghana. An excellent test against a tough team that the Greens could find on their way next match during the playoffs for Qatar 2022 World Cup. This shows the level of these teams led by a certain ephemeral Milovan Rajivac, Algeria coach under the Raurawa era. For this friendly meeting set at 7 p.m. local time, Jamal Belmadi will have to do without many uncertain management players such as Firouli Slimani or later rivals like Mahrez Mendy and Berrahma. Thus a reshaped team could start the game despite the quality of the opponent. Note that the poster will take place in the presence of the public in Magnificent Stadium elected for 2022 World Cup. Just a reminder that the Algerian selection is part of Group E of this continental competition. The Desert Warrior will begin the defense of their title on Tuesday, January 11th against Sierra Leone and on Sunday, January 16 in Douala. Then finally Ivory Coast on Thursday, January 2022 at the same stadium.
And now it's time to have a recap of our main top stories. President Biden addresses the public on Tuesday after meeting with his COVID-19 task force. He announced that he will be doubling the purchase of Pfizer COVID pills as cases surge. Hong Kong has reported its first untraceable local coronavirus case in nearly 3 months, with officials warning it is likely to be an Omicron infection and may indicate silent transmission chains in the community. The U.S. Department of Justice charged the former Colombian military Mario Palacios of involvement in the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse last year. Kazakhstan has lifted protests in some major regions due to the sharp increase of fuel prices. The President Kasim Toyakiev has called for an appeasement to the situation in the country. That's all for me, Nadia Kasmi, and the rest of the team. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.